The young girl had been waiting for this day for months. She clutched her small backpack tightly as she stepped into the crowded airport, her mother beside her, holding her hand and smiling warmly. Today was supposed to be a fun day, the start of a family vacation they had all been talking about for weeks. Her father had already gone ahead to get them through security, and now she felt a mix of excitement and nerves as they headed toward their gate. The airport buzzed with people rushing to catch flights, announcements echoing overhead, and the occasional cry of a toddler in distress. Despite the chaos, the girl's attention was fixed on the flight they were about to take, imagining the adventures they would have and the places they would see. When it was finally time to board, she clutched her ticket, checked the seat number carefully, and walked down the jet bridge with her mother. The cabin smelled faintly of disinfectant and the lingering scent of coffee. The seats were narrow and the overhead compartments loomed above them as they walked down the aisle. She spotted her seat and felt a rush of relief. It was next to the window, just the way she liked it. She set her backpack under the seat in front of her and tried to settle in, thinking about how much she loved looking out at the clouds and imagining what it would feel like to float above the world. Her mother placed her hand gently on the girl's shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. Everything seemed normal and the girl smiled, feeling happy and secure. But then a man in a few rows ahead looked directly at her, frowning deeply. He was older, with graying hair and a stern expression that made him look unapproachable. The girl smiled politely, a little unsure, but she thought perhaps he had just noticed her and was staring for no reason. The man's frown didn't soften. Instead, he leaned toward the flight attendant and started speaking in a loud, demanding voice. The girl couldn't hear everything at first, but she could catch words that made her stomach twist with worry. The man was complaining about her seat. He wanted her removed from it. He gestured angrily, pointing at the girl, and insisted that she didn't belong there. The girl froze, staring at him in disbelief. She had followed all the rules, had her ticket, and had been assigned this seat just like every other passenger. She didn't understand why he thought he could make her move. Her mother immediately stepped forward, placing a protective hand on the girl's back, her voice calm but firm as she tried to explain that the girl had a confirmed seat and everything was fine. The flight attendant approached, trying to mediate, but the man's tone only grew louder and more insistent. The girl felt a wave of embarrassment and shame wash over her. She lowered her eyes, gripping the edge of her seat, wishing she could disappear. Other passengers were watching quietly, some frowning, others looking away awkwardly. A few whispered to each other, exchanging glances that mixed sympathy and discomfort. The girl's mother whispered softly, trying to calm her daughter, telling her to remain seated and not to respond to the man. The girl nodded, feeling a mix of fear and confusion. She wanted to be brave, but her heart was racing and her throat felt tight. The man continued to insist, his voice sharp and demanding. He gestured wildly, making it clear he expected immediate action. The flight attendant explained politely that the girl had a confirmed seat and that he could not remove her. She offered to move him if necessary, but the man refused. He was not willing to compromise and kept raising his voice, making the situation more tense. The girl's mother kept her hand on her daughter's shoulder, whispering words of comfort, trying to shield her from the sting of the man's hostility. Passengers around them shifted in their seats, some giving the man disapproving looks, others quietly watching, unsure whether to intervene. The girl kept her gaze on her lap, silently counting the seconds, hoping the situation would resolve itself. She could feel her mother's heartbeat against her back, steady and reassuring. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing mind, reminding herself that she had done nothing wrong. She wanted to say something, but her mother's gentle hand stopped her, signaling that staying silent was safer for now. The flight attendant attempted several more times to reason with the man, explaining airline policy and the confirmed seating arrangements. Each time he dismissed her words, insisting that he was right and that the girl should leave the seat immediately. The girl could feel her eyes filling with tears, the unfairness of the situation weighing heavily on her small shoulders. She had never experienced anything like this before, and the confusion and fear made her feel small and powerless. Her mother leaned down and whispered that the girl should stay strong, that sometimes people act out of fear or ignorance. She reminded her daughter that she had a right to her seat, and that no one could take it away unfairly. The girl nodded, wiping her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. The cabin was tense, filled with a quiet anticipation as if everyone was waiting to see how the situation would unfold. The girl felt a mix of anxiety and hope, wishing for someone to step in and restore order. The man's anger seemed to grow with each passing minute. He crossed his arms and shook his head, clearly unwilling to accept the truth that the girl had every right to her seat. The girl sat quietly, feeling the weight of his hostility, and tried to focus on her breathing, counting slowly to 10, reminding herself to remain calm. Her mother continued to whisper reassurance, emphasizing that this man's behavior was not her fault and that she had done nothing wrong. The girl's fingers gripped the edge of her seat tightly, a small anchor in the storm of fear and uncertainty. Passengers began to murmur softly among themselves, some expressing concern for the girl, others simply watching with quiet curiosity. The flight attendant stayed close, trying to defuse the situation without escalating it further. The girl's mother remained steadfast, her calm presence a source of strength for her daughter. Despite the man's loud complaints and the tense atmosphere, the girl tried to focus on the small window beside her, imagining the clouds outside and the adventures that awaited them, seeking a mental escape from the uncomfortable reality around her. Minutes felt like hours as the confrontation continued. The girl's heart pounded in her chest and she could feel herself trembling slightly, but she remained seated, holding on to her mother's hand for comfort. The flight attendant tried once more to reason with the man, but he refused to listen. The girl's mother whispered again, encouraging her to stay calm and reassuring her that everything would be okay. The girl nodded, her small frame tense but determined to follow her mother's guidance. Finally, the father's presence, though not yet seen by the man, became the unseen hope in the girl's mind. She thought about him, remembering the stories he had told her about handling difficult situations calmly and wisely. She imagined him stepping in, confident and strong, and that image gave her a small measure of comfort. She focused on that thought, feeling slightly steadier as she tried to endure the tension that filled the cabin. As the situation stretched on, the girl's mother continued to be a pillar of support. She whispered quietly, telling her daughter stories of bravery and resilience, reminding her that sometimes the world could be unfair, but their dignity and composure were things no one could take away. The girl listened intently, absorbing every word, and slowly her trembling began to subside. She knew she had to stay strong, at least until her father arrived, and she clung to that thought like a lifeline. The racist passenger continued his outburst, making it clear he would not relent. But the girl, seated with her mother by her side, remained calm, trying not to let the situation break her spirit. She felt the weight of the man's hostility, but she also felt the steady, reassuring presence of her mother. The flight attendant, though clearly frustrated, continued to try to mediate, explaining policies and offering solutions, but the man's anger was unwavering. Through it all, the girl remained composed, silently wishing for the arrival of her father. Knowing he would handle the situation with strength and authority, she held onto her backpack, hugged it to her chest, and imagined the clouds outside the window, focusing on the beauty beyond the immediate chaos. This small mental escape gave her a sense of control and calm, even as the man continued to make unreasonable demands. The tension in the cabin was palpable, and passengers could feel it, though they stayed seated, uncertain how to intervene. The girl's mother whispered again, reminding her daughter that she was brave and strong, and that this man's anger was not a reflection of her worth. The girl took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and resolved to remain calm no matter what happened next. She knew that with her mother's support she could endure the ordeal and wait for her father's arrival, confident that he would handle the situation wisely and decisively. The man refused to calm down. His voice echoed through the cabin, demanding over and over that the girl be moved from her seat. He gestured wildly at the flight attendant, pointing at the girl, and insisting she did not belong in that section. The cabin was quiet except for the tense sounds of his shouting. Passengers shifted nervously in their seats, some looking toward the girl with sympathy, others trying to avoid making eye contact. A few whispered quietly to one another, sharing concerned glances, but no one spoke loudly enough to challenge him. The girl felt the weight of their eyes on her, some sympathetic, some unsure, and it made her stomach twist. She wished she could disappear, but she stayed still, gripping her backpack and keeping her gaze fixed on her lap. Her mother remained calm, but firm, She placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder, whispering soft, reassuring words. The mother's voice was a lifeline, steady and comforting. She reminded her daughter that this man's anger and prejudice were not her fault. The girl nodded silently, swallowing the lump in her throat. Her mother's hand tightened gently around hers, giving her a sense of safety in the midst of chaos. Every time the man raised his voice, the girl flinched slightly, but her mother's quiet presence helped her feel a little braver. The flight attendant moved closer, trying again to reason with the man. She explained the airline policy politely, telling him that the girl had a confirmed seat and could not be removed. She offered solutions like moving him to another seat if he preferred, but he refused. He shook his head angrily, insisting that he was right and that the girl should be removed immediately. Each word he spoke made the girl's heart beat faster, and she could feel her chest tightening as anxiety and fear threatened to overwhelm her. She stayed seated, holding onto her backpack tightly, drawing comfort from the familiar straps pressed against her chest. Passengers continued to watch quietly, some with discomfort, others with silent support for the girl and her mother. A few shook their heads, clearly disapproving of the man's behavior, but no one spoke up directly. The girl felt the tension in the cabin like a heavy weight pressing down on her shoulders. She tried to focus on her breathing, counting slowly in her head, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Her mother whispered again, telling her to stay calm, to remain quiet, and to trust that this situation would be handled. The girl nodded, holding on to those words as a lifeline. The man's tone grew more aggressive, and he continued to insist on having the girl removed. He leaned toward her mother, trying to intimidate her, but her mother remained composed. She spoke calmly, asserting her daughter's right to the seat and refusing to back down. The girl watched, amazed at her mother's courage. Even in the face of such blatant unfairness, her mother remained calm, her voice steady and reassuring. The girl drew strength from her, feeling slightly more confident despite the fear and tension around her. Minutes passed, each one feeling longer than the last. The girl could feel her stomach twisting with anxiety, but she forced herself to remain seated, holding onto the edge of her seat. She reminded herself to breathe, in and out slowly, and to focus on the little things she could control. She adjusted her backpack on her lap and took a quiet glance out the window, trying to distract herself by imagining the clouds floating by, soft and calm above the chaotic cabin. Her mother leaned down and whispered again, reminding her that bravery was not always loud. Sometimes staying calm and composed was the strongest response. The girl nodded, taking comfort in her mother's words. She understood that this was a test of patience and courage, and that reacting with anger would not solve anything. She kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to focus on the warmth of her mother's hand on her shoulder. It grounded her, giving her a sense of stability amid the tension. The flight attendant continued to negotiate with the man, but he would not listen. He waved his arms, pointing at the girl and demanding compliance. The cabin was filled with an uncomfortable silence, broken only by his loud complaints. The girl felt every eye in the cabin on her, some curious, some sympathetic, some disapproving of the man. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the reassuring presence of her mother and the thought that her father would soon step in. The anticipation of his arrival gave her a small measure of hope, a feeling that the situation would be resolved. Her mother kept whispering encouraging words, telling her daughter that she was brave, that she was doing the right thing by remaining calm. The girl felt a flicker of pride in her chest. Despite the fear, she had not cried, had not shouted, had not allowed the man's prejudice to provoke her. She was sitting there quietly, following her mother's guidance, and that made her feel a little stronger. Each minute that passed without escalation was a small victory, and she focused on those victories to keep her fear at bay. The man's frustration grew with each passing moment. He tapped his fingers impatiently on the armrest, his voice rising again as he continued to demand that the girl be removed. The girl kept her eyes fixed on her lap, imagining the clouds outside, picturing the peaceful sky, and trying to calm her racing heart. She could feel her mother's steady hand on her back, a comforting anchor in the storm of hostility. The whispers of other passengers around her were barely audible, but they offered a small sense of community, a reminder that some people in the cabin understood the unfairness of the situation. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The girl felt a mixture of fear, anxiety, and determination. She wanted to run, to escape, but she knew she had to stay seated and trust her mother. She focused on the small things she could control, her breathing, the tight grip on her backpack, the gentle pressure of her mother's hand. These small actions helped her maintain a sense of control in an environment that felt entirely unfair and chaotic. Her mother continued to whisper softly, reminding her daughter that the man's anger was not a reflection of her worth. She reassured her that she was doing everything right by remaining calm, that her dignity and composure were more important than reacting to his hostility. The girl nodded silently, taking these words to heart, feeling a small measure of courage begin to grow inside her. She could feel the strength of her family around her, even before her father arrived to intervene. The man grew more impatient, pacing slightly in the aisle and waving his arms as he demanded attention. The girl remained seated, feeling her chest tighten but refusing to give in to panic. She focused on the thought that her father would handle this situation, that his calm and authority would resolve the conflict. She imagined him stepping forward, confident and composed, and that image gave her hope. It was a mental escape, a safe space she could retreat to amid the tense and hostile environment. Passengers continued to watch quietly, sensing the tension but unsure how to intervene. Some shifted nervously. Others whispered softly to each other, expressing concern for the girl and her mother. The girl remained still, focusing on her mother's presence and the mental image of her father stepping in. Each passing second was a test of patience and courage, and she clung to her sense of inner strength to endure it. The flight attendant tried once more to reason with the man, explaining politely that the girl had a confirmed seat and that the situation could not be resolved by removing her. She offered to move him if he preferred, but he refused, adamant in his demand. The girl listened quietly, focusing on the gentle words of her mother, using them as a shield against the man's hostility. She felt her heart racing, but she kept her posture calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and her gaze lowered. Finally, the anticipation of her father's presence began to make her feel a little safer. She imagined him approaching, his confident steps, the calm authority in his voice, and the sense of security that would bring. The girl drew strength from that thought, holding on to it tightly as a source of courage. She continued to sit quietly, resisting the urge to react, and finding solace in the small, reassuring presence of her mother beside her. The tension in the cabin was thick, and the young girl could feel it pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. Every time the man raised his voice, her heart raced faster and she gripped her backpack tighter. Her mother stayed calm beside her, speaking quietly and reassuringly, reminding her daughter to stay seated and not react. The girl nodded silently, feeling both anxious and exhausted. She could hear the whispers and murmurs of the passengers around her, some showing sympathy, others just observing, unsure how to act. Despite the fear and discomfort, the girl focused on her mother's presence, finding strength in the steady hand on her shoulder and the gentle, calm words that helped keep her grounded. Suddenly, a familiar figure appeared a few rows back. The girl's father had noticed the situation as he was passing by the cabin. His calm, focused gaze took in the scene, assessing the tension and the aggressive stance of the man. Without hesitation, he approached, each step measured and confident, radiating authority and control. The girl's heart skipped a beat when she saw him, a mixture of relief and awe washing over her. She could feel the knot of fear in her chest loosen slightly, knowing that the person who had always been her protector was now right there to handle the situation. He knelt down beside his daughter, speaking in a calm voice, asking the man to step aside for a moment. The man's frown deepened, clearly not expecting anyone to challenge him. He scoffed, thinking he could intimidate anyone in his way. But the girl's father was different. There was no anger in his tone, only a steady, firm authority that seemed to fill the space around him. He reached into his coat pocket and, with calm precision, flashed his FBI badge. The moment it was visible, the man froze. His words faltered, and his face betrayed a sudden, sharp realization that he had crossed a serious line. Passengers around them gasped quietly, some leaning forward to see what was happening. The girl looked up at her father, eyes wide, a mixture of relief and awe on her face. She felt a warm sense of safety spread through her, knowing that he had full control of the situation. The man who had been so loud and aggressive just moments ago now sat in stunned silence, unsure of how to respond. His body language shifted, from anger to discomfort, as if he had suddenly realized the consequences of his behavior. Her father's voice remained calm but firm. He explained to the man that any further harassment or disrespect toward his daughter would lead to serious consequences. There was no need for shouting, no need for threats. The presence of authority was enough. The man swallowed nervously, his earlier bravado evaporating in an instant. He avoided eye contact, clearly embarrassed and intimidated. The cabin was quiet, the tension having shifted from fear to a stunned, almost relieved silence. Other passengers exchanged looks, some nodding subtly in approval of the father's composed and authoritative handling of the situation. The flight attendant, visibly relieved, stepped back, letting the father take the lead. She thanked him quietly, her expression showing her gratitude for the calm intervention. The girl felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest. Her father had handled the situation with such grace and control, and she realized that she had also played a part by staying calm and composed, as her mother had guided her to do. She sat up a little straighter, a small smile appearing on her lips, feeling safer and stronger with each passing moment. The man finally muttered a few words, barely audible, trying to defend himself, but the father's steady gaze and authoritative presence made it clear that there would be no further argument. The man slumped slightly in his seat, realizing that his attempts to intimidate were futile. Other passengers started to relax, some quietly praising the father's handling with a nod or a whispered comment. The girl felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. She had been frightened, yes, but she had also witnessed a powerful example of calm strength and justice. It made her feel more confident and resilient. Her mother squeezed her hand gently, whispering that she had done well by staying calm and trusting them. The girl felt warmth in her chest, comforted by her mother's words and proud of herself for enduring the ordeal without reacting in anger or fear. She realized that courage could come in many forms, sometimes in loud actions, sometimes in quiet patience and trust. Her father's presence had turned the situation around, and she began to feel that the frightening moments were starting to fade. The man sat quietly now, his previous anger replaced by an uneasy compliance. He avoided looking directly at the girl, his earlier aggression replaced by a hesitant, almost fearful posture. The cabin gradually returned to a more normal rhythm, with passengers shifting in their seats and returning to their personal activities. The girl focused on the small window beside her, looking out at the sky and imagining the clouds drifting by, soft and serene. She felt a sense of calm she had not known just minutes before, a reminder of the power of composed authority and family support. Her father remained by her side, quietly watching the man and ensuring that there would be no further escalation. He spoke softly to the girl, reassuring her that the situation was under control and that she had nothing to fear. She nodded, feeling a sense of security wash over her, knowing that the people she loved were protecting her and that she had played her part by remaining calm and patient. The mother also leaned in, whispering words of pride and comfort, reinforcing the lesson that composure in the face of unfairness was a powerful form of courage. As the flight continued, the girl felt herself relaxing more and more. The initial fear and tension began to fade, replaced by a growing confidence. She realized that she had handled a very difficult situation with the guidance of her family, and that realization made her feel stronger and more capable. She glanced at her father, admiration in her eyes, and he smiled softly, giving her a reassuring nod. She also looked at her mother, grateful for her steady support and calm guidance. The passengers began to settle back into the rhythm of the flight. Some whispered quietly about the incident, some continued reading, and others focused on the sky outside the windows. The cabin no longer felt as tense, and the girl could breathe more easily. She hugged her backpack lightly, feeling comforted by its familiar weight, and focused on the idea that the flight was moving forward, that they were heading toward their destination safely. She felt a renewed sense of hope and resilience. Her father spoke quietly to her, explaining that sometimes people act out of ignorance or fear, and that it was important not to let their negativity shake her confidence. He reminded her that she had handled the situation with grace, staying calm and composed, and that those qualities were just as important as any action he could take. The girl listened intently, absorbing each word, feeling proud of herself and grateful for the guidance of her parents. The man remained silent for the rest of the flight, clearly avoiding further confrontation. The girl felt a mixture of relief and empowerment. She had faced a very uncomfortable and unfair situation, yet she had remained composed and had the support of her family. The passengers around them seemed to recognize the resolution as well, with subtle nods of approval or quiet looks of admiration. The girl realized that even in difficult and unfair circumstances, calmness, patience, and the support of loved ones could make a powerful difference. By the time the flight had reached cruising altitude, the girl had regained a sense of peace. She looked out the window again, watching the clouds drift past, imagining the adventures that awaited them at their destination. The initial fear had faded, replaced by a feeling of strength and resilience. She leaned slightly against her mother, feeling comforted and proud, knowing that she had stayed composed and had relied on the support of her family to navigate the situation. The lesson was clear. Courage could be quiet, composure could be powerful, and family support was invaluable in facing challenges. The rest of the cabin gradually settled into the journey ahead. Passengers returned to their personal activities, some chatting quietly, some reading, and others simply gazing out the windows at the sky. The girl sat calmly, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and curiosity about what lay ahead. She knew she had faced an unexpected challenge and had come through it stronger. The presence of her father had shifted the balance, the guidance of her mother had anchored her, and her own composure had helped her endure. She realized that moments like these, though frightening, could teach valuable lessons about strength, resilience, and the power of calm authority. The cabin had slowly started to calm down, though the tension from the earlier confrontation lingered faintly in the air. The girl still sat tightly gripping her backpack, her small hands pressing against its straps as a reminder of stability. Her mother had relaxed slightly but remained vigilant, eyes following the man who had caused the disruption. Despite the fear and discomfort from before, a growing sense of relief was present. Her father stood nearby, his presence calm, confident and authoritative, offering the reassurance the girl needed without speaking loudly or raising his voice. It was the kind of quiet strength that made the rest of the world feel less threatening. The man who had caused all the commotion remained seated, fidgeting slightly as if he were trying to make sense of the sudden change in dynamics. His previous aggression had disappeared, replaced by a cautious, almost hesitant demeanor. Passengers around them watched with curiosity, some nodding slightly to each other in silent approval of how the situation had been handled. The flight attendant, who had been tense moments before, allowed herself a small sigh of relief. She was thankful for the father's intervention, recognizing the calm authority he brought into what had been a stressful moment. The girl looked up at her father, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The tension in her chest slowly began to loosen. The fear that had made her feel small and helpless earlier was gradually replaced with a quiet sense of empowerment. She could see clearly how her father's calm, measured approach had shifted the situation completely. She realized that fear often loses its power when met with composed strength, and that understanding filled her with a comforting sense of reassurance. Her mother leaned in slightly, whispering softly, praising her for staying calm and showing resilience throughout the ordeal. The girl nodded, feeling a growing sense of pride in herself. Her father knelt down slightly, keeping his eyes on the man, but speaking in a calm tone directly to the girl. He reassured her that the man would not be able to bother her further, and that she had nothing to fear. His voice was steady, a warm presence in the midst of the lingering tension, and it provided a comforting anchor for her. She felt the weight of the anxiety that had built up over the last few minutes begin to dissipate. The cabin, once tense and uncomfortable, began to settle into a quieter rhythm. The people around them returned to their personal activities, and the flight attendant began moving down the aisle, attending to other passengers while keeping a watchful eye on the situation. The man remained quiet now, slumping slightly in his seat. His earlier aggression had faded entirely, replaced by a tense, careful awareness of the authority standing before him. The girl noticed his eyes darting occasionally to her father, a silent acknowledgement that he could not continue his behavior without serious consequences. This realization brought a wave of relief to her, a confirmation that the situation was under control. She hugged her backpack slightly tighter, feeling its familiar weight as a source of comfort and security. Her mother whispered again, reinforcing the lesson that the girl had learned. Composure and patience in the face of unfairness were forms of strength. The girl listened closely, absorbing each word. She understood now that bravery was not always about loud or dramatic actions, but often about remaining calm, trusting those who protect you, and holding on to your dignity, even when faced with hostility. It was a lesson that would stay with her far beyond this flight, one that would shape how she faced challenges in the future. Her father spoke quietly, addressing the girl with gentle authority. He explained that some people act out of fear, ignorance, or prejudice, and that the best way to handle such situations is with calm confidence and measured action. The girl nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words. She had witnessed his method firsthand, seen how he had diffused a dangerous situation without escalating it. That understanding made her feel empowered, giving her a sense of agency she had not felt in the first moments of the confrontation. The presence of her parents, both calm and supportive, had allowed her to endure the tension without giving in to fear. Passengers who had been watching the scene unfold began to relax, their expressions showing relief that the conflict had been resolved without incident. Some whispered quietly to each other, praising the father's handling of the situation and the girl's composure. Others simply returned to their personal activities, feeling a sense of restored calm in the cabin. The flight attendant moved efficiently down the aisle, attending to passengers while occasionally glancing at the girl and her family to ensure that everything remained peaceful. The overall atmosphere, though still carrying traces of tension, had shifted from fear and confrontation to quiet relief and a renewed sense of order. The girl continued to look out the window, watching the clouds drift past, soft and peaceful above the turbulence of the cabin. She focused on the sky, imagining the adventures that awaited her and her family at their destination. The calm, vast sky provided a soothing contrast to the previous moments of stress, helping her to feel grounded and safe. Her backpack remained in her lap, a comforting presence, and she adjusted it slightly, feeling the familiar straps press against her chest and reminding her of her own resilience. Her mother continued to whisper quietly, praising her for her patience, her calm demeanor, and her ability to remain composed even when faced with unfair treatment. The girl felt a sense of pride swelling within her chest. She realized that she had managed to endure a very difficult and uncomfortable situation without letting fear or anger control her actions. This small victory, though not dramatic, felt significant. It reminded her of the importance of patience, resilience, and the support of loved ones in navigating challenging moments. The father stayed close, keeping a watchful eye on the man while speaking softly to the girl. He reminded her that she had done everything right by remaining calm and trusting their guidance. He explained that strength often comes from quiet actions, careful observation, and a steady presence rather than loud confrontation. The girl listened attentively, feeling a deep sense of understanding and appreciation. She realized that courage could take many forms, and that her composure in the cabin had been an important contribution to resolving the situation safely. The man, sensing that further attempts to intimidate would be futile, remained silent for the rest of the flight. His demeanor was cautious and submissive, a stark contrast to the aggressive behavior he had displayed moments before. Passengers around them relaxed further, some offering subtle nods of approval to the father, and others whispering quietly to express admiration for how the situation had been managed. The girl felt a sense of relief wash over her, knowing that the danger had passed and that she was now safe and supported. As the flight continued, the girl focused on the comforting presence of her family. She felt secure with her father nearby, her mother's hand on her shoulder, and the knowledge that she had acted with dignity and composure. The cabin slowly returned to a more normal rhythm, with passengers reading, resting, or quietly talking among themselves. The girl took a deep breath, feeling the tension leave her body gradually, replaced by a growing sense of calm and strength. Her mother whispered once more, reminding her that the ability to remain calm and composed in the face of unfairness was a powerful skill. The girl nodded, understanding the importance of the lesson. She realized that her actions, guided by her family's support, had helped prevent further escalation and had ensured her safety. This understanding brought a sense of pride and confidence that she carried with her as the flight continued. The father spoke softly, explaining that while some people act with ignorance or prejudice, it was important to maintain one's dignity and composure. The girl absorbed every word, feeling a sense of empowerment and reassurance. She had witnessed firsthand the effectiveness of calm, measured action and the value of trusting in the support of loved ones. The cabin, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now carried a quieter, more peaceful atmosphere. The girl felt herself relax further, leaning slightly against her mother, comforted and proud of her resilience. By the time the plane had reached cruising altitude, the girl felt a sense of security and calm she had not known at the beginning of the flight. She looked out at the sky again, imagining the journey ahead and the adventures awaiting her. The lessons she had learned during the confrontation, the value of composure, the strength and patience, and the importance of trusting in family, resonated deeply within her. She hugged her backpack lightly, feeling the familiar weight as a comforting reminder of her resilience and the support of her parents. The cabin had returned to a normal rhythm, and the girl felt ready to face the remainder of the flight with confidence and peace. The plane had settled into a quiet rhythm as it cruised above the clouds, and the girl felt a calm she had not known earlier in the flight. She sat back in her seat, hugging her backpack lightly, and thought about everything that had happened. The memory of the man's anger, his yelling, and the way he had demanded her seat still lingered, but it no longer caused fear. Instead, it reminded her of how her family had stood together, protecting her and helping her stay strong. Her mother's hand rested gently on her shoulder, warm and reassuring, and her father stayed close, calm and observant, ready to intervene if anything changed. She realized that what had once felt like a terrifying situation was now a lesson in courage, patience, and resilience. As she gazed out of the window, the girl reflected on the way the confrontation had unfolded. The man's sudden aggression had shocked her at first, making her feel small and powerless. But she had remained seated, composed and patient, guided by the gentle encouragement of her mother. Then, when her father had appeared, calm and authoritative, he had shifted the balance entirely. Just the sight of him and the moment he had flashed his badge had silenced the man, turning fear into respect and uncertainty. The girl felt a surge of admiration for her father, recognizing the quiet strength and careful authority that had resolved the conflict so efficiently. Her mother leaned in and whispered words of praise, telling her daughter that she had done everything right by staying calm and trusting them. The girl felt warmth spread through her chest at her mother's gentle voice. She realized that her own composure had played a part in resolving the situation, even though it had been her father's presence and authority that had ultimately stopped the man. That understanding filled her with a quiet pride. She had endured fear and hostility without lashing out, without giving in to anger, and that mattered just as much as her father's decisive action. The man who had caused the disruption remained quiet in his seat, avoiding eye contact with the girl and her family. He had clearly understood that further attempts to intimidate or harass would be met with consequences. The rest of the passengers had returned to their personal activities, though some cast subtle, approving glances toward the girl and her family. The flight attendant moved efficiently down the aisle, attending to passengers while occasionally glancing toward the family to make sure the situation remained calm. The cabin had returned to a sense of normalcy, though the lesson of the confrontation lingered quietly in the air. The girl leaned slightly against her mother, feeling comforted and safe. She thought about the way fear could make the world feel larger than it was, how moments of hostility could feel overwhelming. Yet she realized that the calm, steady presence of her parents had provided her with an anchor, helping her endure the moment without giving in to panic. She focused on that thought, understanding that courage often came in quiet forms, in the ability to remain composed and patient in the face of unfairness. She felt a new sense of confidence growing within her, a knowledge that she could face difficult moments with resilience and grace. Her father spoke softly, sharing a few words of wisdom. He explained that some people act out of ignorance or fear, and that it was important not to let their negativity control one's own behavior. He told her that strength often came in the form of quiet patience and measured action, and that maintaining dignity in the face of hostility was a powerful choice. The girl listened attentively, taking in every word. She understood that what had happened on the flight was more than just a moment of fear. It was an opportunity to learn about courage, about the ways that family support and composure could turn a threatening situation into a lesson in resilience. Her mother continued to reinforce the lesson, whispering that she had handled herself well, that she had stayed calm, and that her composure had been important in the resolution of the conflict. The girl nodded, feeling pride and comfort. She realized that enduring difficult moments without giving in to fear or anger was a form of courage that mattered deeply. Her father's presence had ensured safety, her mother's guidance had provided reassurance, and her own calm demeanor had allowed the situation to remain controlled. Together, they had faced a challenging moment and come through it stronger. The rest of the flight passed with a quiet rhythm. The girl looked out of the window, imagining the clouds below and the world beyond them. She thought about the journey ahead, feeling excitement for the adventures awaiting her family. She also thought about the lessons she had learned, understanding that challenges would arise in life, but that courage, patience, and the support of loved ones could make a real difference. The memory of the man's aggression no longer caused fear. It had become a reminder of the power of calm authority and composed action. Passengers continued to move about quietly, reading, resting, or observing the sky outside their windows. The cabin was calm, and the girl felt a sense of relief that the tension had been resolved. She hugged her backpack, feeling its familiar weight as a source of comfort. She glanced at her father, admiration shining in her eyes, and he returned a reassuring nod. She also looked at her mother, gratitude and love evident in her expression. She felt surrounded by a protective presence, knowing that together, they could face challenges and emerge stronger. Her father spoke again quietly and calmly, reminding her that maintaining composure, patience, and dignity was sometimes the strongest way to handle difficult situations. He told her that responding with anger or aggression often escalated conflict, while calm authority and careful action could resolve problems efficiently and safely. The girl absorbed the lesson, understanding that her own actions, combined with the support of her parents, had helped to navigate the situation on the flight. She felt empowered, confident that she could face future challenges with the same grace and resilience. Her mother whispered words of pride and reassurance once more, emphasizing the girl's bravery and calm demeanor. The girl felt a sense of accomplishment, understanding that she had contributed to the resolution of the situation through patience and composure. She realized that courage came in many forms, and that the ability to remain calm and collected in the face of unfairness was a powerful and valuable skill. She hugged her backpack again, feeling the sense of comfort and security it provided, and focused on the peaceful journey ahead. The cabin had returned to a steady rhythm. Passengers had settled back into their seats, some whispering quietly about the earlier confrontation, others reading or looking out the windows. The man who had caused the conflict remained subdued, clearly aware that his behavior would no longer be tolerated. The girl felt a wave of relief, recognizing that the threat had passed and that she was safe. Her father's presence, her mother's guidance, and her own composure had all contributed to the resolution. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for her family and the strength they had provided. As the flight continued, the girl reflected on the events and the lessons they had taught her. She realized that moments of fear and unfairness could be transformed into lessons of courage and resilience when approached with calmness, patience, and support from loved ones. She felt proud of herself for enduring the situation without giving in to fear or anger, and grateful for the protective presence of her parents. The experience had strengthened her understanding of courage and the value of composure, and she carried that knowledge with her as the plane soared above the clouds. She looked out of the window, imagining the adventures that awaited her family at their destination. The sky was wide and open, filled with soft clouds that seemed to float gently beneath them. The girl felt a sense of freedom and possibility, knowing that she could face challenges with resilience and strength. She leaned slightly against her mother, feeling the warmth and support that had helped her navigate the tense moments earlier. Her father remained nearby, calm and watchful, ensuring her safety while allowing her to regain her sense of peace and confidence. The girl realized that the flight had become more than just a journey to a destination. It had been a lesson in courage, patience, and the power of family support. She understood that the ability to remain composed and trust in loved ones could transform moments of fear into opportunities for growth. She hugged her backpack lightly, feeling its familiar presence as a source of comfort and strength. She knew that the lessons she had learned on this flight would stay with her, helping her face challenges with confidence and resilience in the future. The plane continued its journey steadily, the hum of the engines a constant soothing presence. The girl felt a sense of calm and safety enveloping her, reinforced by the presence of her parents. She glanced around the cabin, noticing the quiet shift in atmosphere as passengers resumed their activities and the tension from earlier dissipated. The girl felt empowered and grateful, understanding that courage, composure, and family support had carried her through a difficult moment. She leaned back in her seat, taking a deep breath, and allowed herself to feel peace, pride, and hope for the adventures that lay ahead.